Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:07. Thanks for tuning in on this Wednesday morning, the 3rd day of December. And thanks for joining our morning party. Coming up in 30 minutes, Cal Thomas will be our guest. At 7:05, Ian Pryor of America First Legal. Big victory coming out of Fairfax schools. They're just bound and determined to make sure that boys can go into girls' rooms and girls can go into boys' rooms. But America First Legal, Ian Pryor, they know what time it is. 7:35, Byron York of The Examiner will be our guest. We'll talk about the Somali, Minnesota scandal. And then at 8:05, Matthew Hurt, our buddy out of the Arlington County Republican Party, will join us in the aftermath of last month's elections. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Jules, good morning to you.
Hello. Good morning.
There's a lot to discuss out of Minnesota. We touched on it a little bit in the last hour, but I want to reemphasize, and you need to help me reemphasize this, that this is not a new story. Yes, the convictions are relatively new. What's new about this is that the New York Times woke up and actually did a story about this. This is what happens in the legacy corporate media, is that stories are out there, but it's not considered a story unless the New York Times says that it's a story.
That's right. Right.
It's almost like the New York Times grants permission. Okay, we can all talk about this now. And part of that, they'll say, well, you know, the New York Times, it's the gold standard. It's the grand old lady. It's all the news that's fit to print.
I always think of Joan Rivers imitating the Queen. You know, it's just this.
Exactly.
The chattering times.
Yes. I mean, they wear tweed jackets with elbow patches. That's who they are.
That's super smart.
And to be fair, the New York Times does have a huge budget, and they probably have the biggest budget of any major news publications, newspaper. And so there's, I think, an assumption there, well, if the New York Times is going to expend their focus and their resources and their expertise, that must mean this is a legitimate story. But there's also an ideological aspect of this, that the New York Times has become this standard of intelligentsia, liberal dogma.
Yeah.
That you know, we just don't go there. We don't talk about such things unless given permission. So because the New York Times did this story a week ago about the fraud that is run rampant through the state health services, it all started during COVID, and it was all meant to target children. This is what really burns me, that gets lost in the mix. These are programs that were set up by pulling on the heartstrings of the people of Minnesota and the people of this country, because this is federal money as well, saying, well, there are children during the pandemic who have autism, who are on the spectrum, who were getting lost, who were falling through the cracks.
By the way, because of Randy Weingarten, but go on.
And because of Tim Walz. And because of Anthony Fauci and all and on and on and on.
Right.
And by the way, the fact of the matter is there were special needs children who were neglected, who were
100%.
desperate to get back into their regular IEP that they were supposed to get. And it turns out that an extraordinary number of those autistic children all happened to be Somali refugees without any real diagnosis, and millions upon millions. And so as of now, it's a little over $1 billion has been funneled into these programs fraudulently. And anytime over the last several years, anyone raised questions about it, they were told, oh, well, you're racist. You're anti-Somali. You're anti-refugee. You're anti-immigrant. You're MAGA. You're, whatever pejorative you want to throw out there. But the last thing they ever wanted to say is, oh, you're actually concerned about government fraud, waste, and abuse, and criminal activity. But now there have finally been convictions here. Now, we've got corrupt judges who are trying to overturn these convictions already and get people off, again, under the guise of well, this is a put upon class. This is, they don't understand. It's all outrageous. Christopher Rufo, who has written a seminal piece about this over at City Journal, calls it the largest funder of Al-Shabaab is the Minnesota taxpayer. By the way, Al-Shabaab is an East African terror group. He pointed out this story and said the Somali fraud story reveals the truth liberals would prefer to ignore. When Nordic welfare state culture and Somali piracy culture collide, the result is mass looting of the public treasury. Well said. The uncomfortable truth for Times readers is that all cultures are not equal. Therefore, not all cultures are compatible with all political systems. In this case, the Somali criminal enterprise is incompatible with a generous welfare state, particularly in the context of a racial politics that intimidates whistleblowers and other honest brokers. So incredibly well said. But this goes well beyond Minnesota and the Scandinavian Nordic culture, which is very big government and very socialist-minded, and the conflict that comes with the piracy that's inherent in the Somali refugees that a minute and a half ago were living in the war-torn, warlord-driven world of the Horn of Africa, and now are saying, look at all this money that's around here, let's take our share.
Well, what is so galling, too?
But if I may, real fast, close my loop, it goes well beyond that. This is about the national media. This is because Tim Walz, the person in charge of all of this, was the running mate. He was going to be one heartbeat away from the presidency. All of this was right under the nose of all of these news entities and all these news organizations, and all they wanted to talk about was the joy that Tim Walz brought to the ticket with Kamala Harris, and they never vetted him and never looked at his record. Okay,
They didn't. And one aspect of this that I find so galling is that now that it's come out, it's like that Norm Macdonald joke that everyone passes around, where he said, if radical Muslims nuke the United States, I'm just really worried about the backlash on the Muslim community. Right?
Yes, exactly.
We're living that now. That this incredible widespread fraudulent corruption has been exposed in Minnesota. Tim Walz, Keith Ellison, they're all, what did they know? Were they involved? This has all been exposed, and of course, the narrative is, well, I really worry about how this is going to affect the Somali community in Minnesota. Now, this is the thing. If you really cared about the Somali community, you would know that some of the whistleblowers that came forward to expose this rot and were ignored in many cases by the media and by government officials in Minnesota, were Somali, okay? Yeah. There are some very good Somali individuals from Somalia. They've come to the United States. They're citizens now, and they're working within this social services sort of system in Minnesota. They were the whistleblowers in many cases. They came forward. So if you really care about the Somali community, you will lift up those people, those who are working to correct the situation in Minnesota, and expose the Somali immigrants who came to this country and were so ungrateful and then figured out a way to steal from American taxpayers, right? But it's immediate, hands off all Somalis, hands off the entire community. No. Let's expose the bad ones. Let's lift up the good ones.
And as usual, Somali refugees are the victims of this.
Yes.
It's their tax dollars too. And these are programs that were meant to help their kids, and they never actually did that because the money was funneled partly into the pockets of these pirates who stole the money.
What is the situation within this Somali community where this is, because it is really widespread? Why can't we talk about that? Right. Why is that off limits?
Why? Oh, I'll tell you why. Because here's what Governor Tim Walz says the second you do. This is cut 11. Go ahead and listen. This is what you'll hear.
Demonizing an entire group of people who came here fleeing civil war.
There you go. There you go. Because you're demonizing them. But the money ended up in the pockets of these corrupt criminals. Then some of it got funneled back to the Democrat Party of Minnesota, the DFL, which basically then funds Tim Walz's campaign, Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, that corrupt monster, and the entire party apparatus. And then the rest of the money went to terrorist organizations back in Eastern Africa. This is a scandal of epic proportion, and the U.S. Attorney's Office is now getting involved. A little bit more on this, and another horrific story out of Minnesota that you need to hear about. Minnesota is falling apart right now. And it is, again, an indictment on the political media in Washington, D.C. for never drawing any attention to this because they loved Kamala Harris and they loved Tim Walz. It's 6:15.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Minnesota is drowning in fraud. Billions in taxpayer dollars been stolen during the administration of Governor Tim Walz. Democratic state officials overseeing one of the most generous welfare regimes in the country are asleep at the switch, and the media, duty-bound by progressive pieties, refuse to connect the dots. This is the write-up by Christopher Rufo and Ryan Thorpe at City Journal. In many cases, the fraud has allegedly been perpetrated by members of Minnesota's sizable Somali community. Federal counterterrorism sources confirm that millions of dollars in stolen funds have been sent back to Somalia, where they ultimately landed in the hands of the terror group Al-Shabaab. As one confidential source put it, the largest funder of Al-Shabaab is the Minnesota taxpayer. And again, can't be said enough. The mainstream political media in Washington, D.C. didn't cover any of this during the last presidential campaign, when the governor, whose hands are completely covered in blood on this story, was neck deep in it. And that's why you'll hear, as President Trump reacted to this New York Times article from over the weekend and said, there's a real problem here with the Somali community and the corruption going on. Cut 12, here's Governor Walz. The only response he's got.
As far as demonizing our Somali community, maybe he could help us on some things. Demonizing an entire community, folks who are in the professions, educators, artists, doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, they bring the diversity and the energy to a place like Minnesota.
The diversity and energy, and they're entrepreneurs. They're entrepreneurs, all right. They come up with real creative ways to make money. And again, at the risk of demonizing an entire community, here's one other piece of diversity that's going on in the greater Minneapolis area, thanks to this community. Here's a news report locally, cut 10.
A man out on probation for sexual assault is charged once again. This time, prosecutors say he picked up a woman he met on Snapchat and raped her at a hotel in Bloomington.
Now, prosecutors once called this man an extreme public safety risk, but he never spent a day in prison for his previous crimes. Fox 9's Mike Manzoni joining us from our newsroom now. And Mike, prosecutors signed off on plea deals in these previous cases.
Kelsey and Randy, a judge sentenced the Minneapolis man in those cases back in May, but he got credit for time served, so he never went to prison. It was all part of a pair of plea deals. This is the man we're talking about. His name is Abdemahat Billy Muhammad, but prosecutors say the 28-year-old uses the names Kareem and Altesto on Snapchat, and that is where investigators say he met his latest victim as well as his two previous ones. Prosecutors say he picked up his most recent victim in Mankato back in September, then drove her to a hotel near the Mall of America, where he took her phone, told her she wasn't leaving, raped her, and held her against her will for days. That's according to prosecutors. Investigators used DNA to identify Muhammad as the suspect. His profile was already in the database from previous cases involving sexual assaults in Minneapolis in 2017 and another one in 2024. A Hennepin County judge sentenced Muhammad in May in those cases, including one involving a 15-year-old girl. Prosecutors say two other unidentified men took part in that assault, and one threatened the victim with a gun. But Muhammad never spent a day in prison, as we said, because he got credit for time served while awaiting trial as part of a pair of plea deals. We've reached out to the Hennepin County Attorney's Office for comment. A spokesman there told us it is checking into it.
Two sexual assaults, including that of a 15-year-old girl. Never spent a day in jail, struck a plea deal, was out walking the streets, and now he's assaulted another woman and has been arrested. And that is Tim Walz and Keith Ellison's Minnesota.
And really quickly, Larry, that is such a horrifying story, and there's almost no press coverage of that. No. I'm glad that we played that entire report. What is getting much more commentary, much more coverage, is Trump saying these people don't belong in our country. If they're going to break the laws, if they're corrupt, if they're running these fraudulent systems, they don't belong in our country. Where's the lie? Who has a problem with that? If you're running this kind of program that is defrauding Americans of their taxpayer dollars, of course you should get out of the country. That is getting much more coverage than both the fraud story and this horrifying story of this rape.
Could I just, great point, thank you. Can I just add one more little observation that sure. I see when I hear these stories coming out of Minnesota? I just want to reiterate, this is the guy Kamala Harris and her campaign chose as the best candidate to be the vice president right now. So, and make no mistake, the media may have ignored these stories, but I assure you, the political professionals surrounding Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they knew exactly what was going on in Minnesota. They knew this stuff, and they determined, this is what makes me so happy, they determined that of the other choices, including Josh Shapiro and Mark Kelly, who's now the it girl for the Democrats, Mark Kelly out of Arizona, that the astronaut, the captain in the Navy, Gabby Gifford's husband, the man who's like Captain America now, they still chose Tim Walz over him. What kind of nightmare garbage does Mark Kelly have in his closet?
And don't forget, Tim Walz also came with the baggage of the stolen valor stuff, right? Kind of lying about his record, and also some weird trips to China, and he was the best.
They still determined that Mark Kelly was going to be a problem. So
quite a bench.
I know everyone thinks Mark Kelly is going to be it. Just wait.
The thumb.
There's plenty. There's plenty we're going to learn about Mr. Kelly. It's 6:24.
Coming up, it's cow time. Keep it here. It's 6:30.
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
6:37 on this Wednesday, 3rd day of December. Thanks for joining us on our morning party here. It's 7:05. Ian Pryor from America First Legal will join us. 7:35. Byron York, our pal at the Washington Examiner. More on that Somali, Minnesota scandal. And then at 8:05, Matthew Hurt of the Republican Party of Arlington County. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. And Julie, guess what?
What?
Yesterday was Cal Thomas's birthday.
Oh, my gosh.
Cal Thomas, happy birthday, my friend. You made it one more year.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Age is just a number, and mine is unlisted, as the commercial said.
Well, Cal, we've uncovered more information about that horrific murder of the National Guardswoman here in Washington, D.C. And now we have, at least apparently, the one surviving guardsman is somewhat responsive but still in serious condition. And, of course, President Trump utilizes colorful language to suggest that maybe the Afghan nationals who were flooded into the country during the Biden pullout weren't properly vetted, and maybe we need to revet them. I mean, beyond the president's, typical language that often pushes buttons on the left, the concept of revetting these people and making sure that they don't mean us any harm doesn't seem to be that controversial. So why is it treated as such?
Because everything is politics in Washington. You know that. 190,000 Afghan refugees came in all at once. Jen Psaki, when she was White House press secretary, said that all had been vetted. Well, that's just impossible. I mean, it was a disastrous pullout. They let most of them in all at once. You can't vet like this. Now we're told that this alleged shooter, as you say, is somebody who was radicalized after he got in here. Okay, well, was it through his mosque? Was it online? Was it through friends? Look, you can't have a country if you dilute its founding principles with a lot of people who don't share those principles. It's like pouring water into a cup of coffee. If you pour it for a short time, it dilutes it. If you pour it for a long enough time, it replaces it. And I think what the president's going to do now with those Somalis in Minnesota, vet them, I think that's what we have to do. Or, as he likes to say, we won't have a country.
Yeah.
It's really amazing, Cal, how the media just ignored this. We talked about it. Larry and I talked about it in the last hour. I mean, Tim Walz, heartbeat away, nominee to be vice president. This was a scandal that people were talking about for years, and the mainstream media totally ignored this. Last night on CNN, Abby Phillips was sort of, doing her firefighter business for the left, saying, nothing to see here. This is a huge scandal, not just for Minnesota politicians, but for the media, both in Minnesota and nationally. What do you make of this? Do you think this is something that's going to turn into something bigger, or will it just kind of go away?
Well, it'll probably go away. I mean, look at the numbers for the media trust. They're down in the basement. Since Gallup began polling on media trust, I think it's 40 or 50 years ago, these are the lowest numbers anybody has ever seen. So most people, most Republicans, most conservatives don't rely on the media anymore. The view is, well, I didn't know anything about all this fraud and abuse and all this money going to individuals and places where it was not intended. But if I did know about it, I didn't benefit from it. And if I did benefit from it, nobody told me I benefited from it. This is the way the game is played. It's like the Washington Post coverage this morning of this special election yesterday in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Here's a line. This is great. I just love this line in the story. While far from a perfect predictor of future outcomes, now you know if Van Epps had lost, it would be a tremendous predictor of future outcomes.
Oh, are you kidding? It would be like the oracle on the mountain saying, oh, let it be so. This is what it shall be. Oh, yeah. God.
Yeah, they were all set
They're
up.
so predictable.
Yeah, and 3 times they mentioned in the story, the writer, the ruby red district. So, well, after all, Trump wasn't on the ballot, and it was close, and Van Epps didn't win by as big a margin as Trump did. But if we. It's such a joke anymore. It really is. I read the Post and the Bible every day, so I know what each side is doing.
Cal Thomas, of course, our guest, as he always is at this time on Wednesdays. And Cal, I treasure these moments because you help make sense of things that just don't make sense on the face of it. So, speaking of non-controversies, apparently we need literally a judicial order to stop the Trump administration from sprucing up the executive office building, the Eisenhower executive office building. They literally tried to prevent him from painting the building?
It would have been a much easier job. And the building is kind of ugly and retro and doesn't fit in with everything else. What he should have done, in my view, is to go out to certain places in Washington where the graffiti artists are always in business and get them in the middle of the night with cans of white paint and have it done overnight. And when the Democrats wake up in the morning, they think they will have arrived in the Golden City or the city of Oz. I think making it fit in with the other white buildings in the area, not a bad idea. But the Democrats are bothered by everything, everything that Trump does. They can't. If he says 1 and 1 is 2, they'll say, "Look, he had a bad education. He can't go beyond that."
Yeah, I suppose so. Did you get to see? By the way, did you see the First Lady's Christmas decorations there at the White House? Did you have?
I didn't get an invitation this year, and I'm really ticked off by it. I've been to many of them over the years, Republican and Democrat presidents, and they kicked me off the list. I guess I wasn't fully sycophant. I don't know.
You and me both, Cal. So I don't get invited either. Oh yeah.
Oh man, Larry. Well,
me neither. Me neither.
I'll be up at Christmas time. You can come by my little apartment and see my 6-inch Christmas tree.
I would love to, Cal, but I might have to try to convince you to run for mayor of D.C. now that Muriel Bowser is not running for re-election. I think this is your chance.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fit. Yeah, a white conservative guy in D.C.
Come on. Hey, if William F. Buckley could run for mayor of New York City, Cal Thomas can run for mayor of D.C.
Well, he can do it, but...
Times are different. Oh,
Thanks,
did I? Okay, guys. Good to talk to you.
Bye. It is 6:43.
Mark Levin, weekdays 6 till 9 on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
So we've got some news out of the Republican Party in Virginia. The State Senator Mark Peake, who was the chairman of the Virginia Republican Party, decided that he would step down from that position, a position he fought very hard to have, by the way. But there were many observers who were like, wait a second, you're a state senator and you're going to be the chair of the Republican Party. How's that going to work out? And obviously the Republican Party of Virginia suffered a pretty bad loss last month, losing all of the top races in the state and losing many districts, swinging a larger majority to the Democrats. They gained 13 seats in the House of Delegates. It was just awful. So Senator Peake has said that he wants to focus on next year's legislative session as a state senator rather than the duties of the Virginia Republican Party. So now that seat is open.
I think this is the right thing to do, and new blood, new ideas. That's it's going to be a tough 4 years in Virginia, and I think people are very concerned about the future, and so I'm glad we're going to see new leadership.
Are you making an announcement?
Me? Goodness, no.
You would be awesome as the Republican Party chair.
Oh, thank you.
In Virginia.
Thank you. Yes, well.
Not
dig up all my comments about Alexandria. Although I don't know that many Republicans would disagree with me.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
Arlington County Chairman Matthew Hurt is quoted in this piece for the Washington Examiner saying that it's appropriate for someone to be held accountable after that election. He can't say Peake was at fault for a lot of the election results. He said Republicans are always facing headwinds in the 2025 election in Virginia, but somebody has to take the fall in politics for results in the election like we had, and that's true. I think it's probably a good idea to shake things up and move things along. Now, you remember that Scott Pio, the chairman of the Republican Party in Loudoun, he ran for this seat, and it seemed like there was a big Richmond contingent of establishment Republicans who didn't want Scott anywhere near that position. Scott's still in charge of the Loudoun County Republican Party. Matthew Hurt, the aforementioned, he's going to be joining us, by the way. Matthew Hurt is later in the program. He's going to join us at 8:05, but I suspect that Pio will try to run for this again. There's going to be calls for Rich Anderson to come back because things were going pretty well under Anderson, and he had done it for a while and then stepped down. Who else could be a contender?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, honestly, frankly, I think Matthew Hurt would be incredible. What he's done in Arlington between turnout and also just enthusiasm and really fighting a good fight in a respectful way, yet really taking charge and facing the issues head on. And again, with turnout, Matthew's been great. So I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot of people in the race. I don't want to, necessarily, put all my. Say I'm bullied for Matt. I don't even know if Matthew's interested, but I think he's great.
What do you got to do? You got to be able to raise money. You got to be able to recruit candidates. You got to be able to do media appearances. You got to be able to make sure that you've got good, qualified, vetted candidates who can be viable and run. You got to figure out a way to crack the code in Northern Virginia. Katie Gorka's only been in the position at Fairfax County for a little while, but part of me is like, okay, well, if you're working in Fairfax and you're trying to recruit voters and recruit candidates in Fairfax or Arlington or Loudoun, that probably is a good item on the resume. The problem is you're not winning. I'd like to have, and again, it's no cut against Katie or Pio or Matthew Hurt, but you want somebody who's got a track record of winning races, and those Republicans are from downstate. Or from Western Virginia.
I think in Northern Virginia, too, it's really tough because, a lot of Republicans are sort of sympathetic to MAGA, and we're very thrilled with DOJ, which is a direct attack on federal workers, which makes up a large portion of the people who live around here. And I also think you need to be able to talk to women in Northern Virginia, professional women who they tend to be sympathetic to things like climate change, and so they're all for renewables, and yet you have Republicans out there attacking renewables instead of talking about reliability of renewals, and that actually moves women. So really understanding how to speak to women. I don't mean that condescendingly. I mean there are ways in which women kind of wake up. The idea that the prices for energy might go up, that makes women listen, right? The idea that it might not be reliable, that you might have blackouts, women listen to that stuff. But just basically taking a bat to wind and solar and other forms of that's not going to work. So again, learning how to communicate with different demographics, and I think
thread
women,
the needle.
Yeah, that's really important.
And focus on the important issues. I'll tell you this also, Governor Youngkin obviously has a pretty winning political team that has worked with him for the last 4 years and won statewide. And they're all going to be looking for work coming up in about a month. So maybe somebody from the Youngkin apparatus would be a good candidate for that job, too. I don't know. Well, as I mentioned, the chairman of the Arlington County Republican Party, Matthew Hurt, will join us at 8:05. Maybe he'll have something to tell us. Right now it's 6:52.